Hi, Sarah. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing, Rebecca? It's so nice to talk to you again. It's been too long.
It has been too long.
Got away from them.
So yeah, yeah, right. So we're gonna start our new dog training podcast show today. I think we're gonna talk about common societal expectations today.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome.
Expectations versus reality. Always a great
Yeah.
conversation.
So, what are some sort of societal expectations that you feel like are common when you're working with your clients?
Yeah. Like I know you and I have had conversations about this a lot. I think like one of the big things for me is we've kind of come up with this like idea as a society that dogs are all the same and they're all perfect and beautiful and they love everybody and they love everything and they will never react poorly and they will never bite, and they will do this all without training. And
Yeah.
people who work with dogs really know that this is just not true, that dogs are very different and they have different drives and needs, and different dogs are bred to react differently in different situations, and not all dogs can handle everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that same thing. It's this idea that it's not never should bite, but like the dog shouldn't want to bite, should
Mhm.
never like, and the other one being like, oh, but if it's my family, the dog should know the difference between, my family and, an intruder, like those things,
Right.
like the altruistic, like all-knowing dog, you know? So,
And the dog that can, just go out in public and be perfectly trained without any work and understand commands without training and tolerate other dogs in their space and other people in their
oh yeah.
space. And a lot of
Dogs are
dogs,
born knowing English, right?
oh yeah, and a lot of dogs really will struggle with that type of thing. It takes a really special dog to be able to kind of tolerate attention from everybody, without perceiving that as a threat, and to be comfortable with all dogs getting in their space and kids and all of that. Like we have, bred dogs selectively for thousands of years
Thousands
to
of years, yes.
do jobs that now kind of like directly conflict with what we want dogs to do.
In modern society,
Yeah,
yeah,
and how
absolutely.
we expect them to behave.
What do you feel like is like some of the reasons that these, myths or expectations kind of perpetuate? I know for me, like, some people are like, oh, well, I saw my friend's guide dog, and it does all of these things. Like my dog should be able to do it. And it's like, well, you have a Chihuahua. Like that might not work. So, what do you feel is like some reasons that these are appearing?
Well, we definitely, like, I'm sure you're familiar, and listeners have probably heard the kind of concept of like it's all how you raise them. And like all how you raise them kind of refers to, it doesn't matter what the dog's genetic background is. It doesn't matter if their parents had behavior problems or, if their mom was stressed when they were in utero. It doesn't matter because once you take that dog and you apply your influence to it, you can make that dog into whatever you want. And it's kind
Yeah,
of
you just got to be alpha enough, right?
right. It's going to be all fun up. You just have to socialize them. And people who work with dogs or people who have owned a problem dog know that that's not always the case. My other issue with that is it puts blame or feelings of blame on an owner who's struggling with behavior issues. Because I did everything right and this dog still has issues. Well, you know what? We know with people that it's not all how you're raised, right? Like we know with us. So I think we have to start to think about that with dogs and get rid of that idea because it's not. It's their genetic background, their parents' temperaments. If the mother is sick or stressed, that can affect the puppy's ability to deal with stress. And kind of like, yeah, what the dogs and their genetic background were bred for. And then on top of that, how you raise them. But it's like an elastic band. So their genetics and the stuff that happens to them before you get them, you can only stretch it so far, right? So what you do can only affect what's there. You can mold it, but you can't change its essence.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You can mold it, but you can't change its essence. And, if you're trying to, make a really nice vase out of clay, if you're getting really crappy clay, like you're not going to make a vase that's going to stand up on its own. And there's certain clays that like don't fire right, right? So dogs are similar, and you'll get outliers for your dogs too. Like everybody loves to talk about the pit bull who gets along with every animal and everybody, and it's just the sweetest thing and wouldn't hurt a fly. But I, as a pit bull owner, also have seen the real genetics of that too, of
Yes.
like extreme prey drive, extreme willingness to work, being super sensitive when not in drive. Like it really is kind of a mixed bag, and you have to really go into it understanding that, yeah, there's outliers, but also you're going to get what you're going to get depending on environment and genetics. So,
Yeah, and like breed tendencies are always a bell curve, right? So there's going to be some that are in the middle, some that are on the extreme upper end, and we all know the border collie who won't hurt, right? So it's not a guarantee, but it does kind of give you some idea of what your dog might like and what your dog might be overwhelmed by and what your dog might get turned on or aroused by as well.
yeah. And then also just to like slide this in there in terms of like if you have a mixed breed, so if you have, a breed that's like a Malinois and a poodle and a lab all in one, like you're also gonna get a very mixed bag. And comparing like the expectations of like, oh well, his litter mate or his mom, like comparing that, like you're getting a mixed bag because it's kind of wild genetics. And a DNA test can help you understand why behaviors might be happening, but it's not going to define the dog either.
No,
So,
especially not if there's no predominant breed or breed group. You're just gonna have to figure out the dog in front of you in those instances. But then it's also really hard to predict behavior based off of breed with mixed breeds because you don't know, right?
yeah. So we're basically saying train the dog in front of you, right?
Mhm.
Um, what are some other misconceptions and myths? Like we've already talked about, it's all in how you raise them. Being the alpha is a really, really common one that, depending on where you're at in the US or the world, you might still struggle with. Um, what are some other ones that you feel like are pretty prevalent in the clients that you work with?
I do want to talk a bit more about the dominance thing, if we can, because we didn't really dive into that one yet. I actually was
For sure.
just talking about this in an interview that I did yesterday. And we kind of have touched on it before, but it's like I think the whole like alpha and dominance thing like really became popular when Caesar Milan was popular. And it drives me crazy because like I'm not a huge Caesar fan, but I think there was some parts of his message that were really important. And
For sure.
popular culture just totally breezed over the important stuff, and all they heard was I have to poke my dog and hiss at them and dominate them, right?
Yeah.
So
Gotta leave out the door first. You gotta, do 45-minute structured walk twice a day. Yeah.
and I
So,
think that there are some truths in some of that, but I feel like with dominance theory, it works for not the reasons that the people that are recommending dominance theory thinks it works. Like, not necessarily because you're the dominant. We are the dominant one. We control everything in their lives,
all the
right? Like we
resources.
don't
Yeah.
also have to physically abuse them. Okay. We control all their food, we control their access to everything. Like we are the dominant one in the relationship. Okay. But dogs do not come pre-programmed understanding our world. They are body language based and humans are verbal based, which is really sometimes there's a big communication gap there. So I think that when you have someone who's like really big into dominance theory, some of the benefits of what they're talking about could be making things more clear for the dog, right? So if the dog
Yeah.
doesn't understand that he should wait at the door, and we teach him every time we go, they're going to wait, that's a rule and a boundary that produces clarity, which makes the dog's world make sense, which reduces anxiety, right? So the
a hundred
more that
percent.
we can step up and guide our dogs and teach them how to behave, the less anxious they will. So it's not you have to be the alpha, but being a good parent or a good guide or coach to your dog is really important, and that's just by providing clarity. So a lot of the
Yes.
dominant stuff does that. It provides clarity, right? It's very heavy on rules and boundaries, probably a little bit too much, but it does
Yeah.
benefit a lot of dogs because it provides clarity, which reduces stress. Like if you think about dogs as basically like you've just taken an alien baby from another planet and you've put it into your house and it knows nothing about you, it doesn't speak your language, right? Baby from another planet.
Yes.
um, if you think about it that way, and we just expect them to understand everything, and how we do and tolerate everything in the human world when it's like totally sensory overload for a lot of them. If you start to put like really clear structure into how things work, it's going to help that alien baby understand, oh, this is the way things go. And also consistency, right? Like a lot of
100%.
dominance theory stuff is about being really consistent, and that we know that's really important because it helps the dog understand these are predictable patterns of behavior in my world, which makes me not feel anxious because I know how things work.
Yeah, I mean, you can get all of those experiences, the consistency, the impulse control, thresholds. I mean, I label them differently, but they're all in the same vein. You can get all of that without eating before your dog, alpha
Right,
rolling them, poking them in the side, giving super huge leash corrections.
right,
You can get all of that without doing the other stuff that comes with alpha dominance theory style training.
right. And I think that like a lot of the people who were proponents of this stuff or are proponents of this stuff are like, well, it's how dogs communicate with each other. But like, it's not really, and you don't need to eat before your dog. You're already giving them the food, right? Like that's already
The
established.
resources are plentiful.
Yes. The resources are established. They understand without you eating out of their bowl or eating your cereal and then giving them their dog food that you are controlling the food, right? Um, the alpha role, if you watch dogs interact, like the alpha role is offered by the dog who's feeling submissive or wants to defer to the other animal. And like a wolf will never like take another wolf and flip it over unless he's gonna kill them. So when we're like
Right.
when you're physically grabbing your dog and forcing them into that position, it's really
You're
upsetting.
basically going, I'm about to murder you.
I'm about to murder you, right? It's very upsetting for them. It's very threatening. And it's not how dogs communicate. It's us and basically taking a bad language interpretation of their communication. The other dog will offer that. So it's like your dog rolling over and saying, okay, get my belly, like showing that sensitive, vulnerable area. That is like really what an alpha role to look like. And
Yeah.
yeah, like
I mean,
all the
honestly, like just to hit on that point of the alpha stuff was taken from a scientist that studied it and then later rebuked it. And I've always equated it to, look, you put a couple of people into a cage match, they're going to fight because the space is limited, the resources are super limited. They're going to fight because there's no other option. But what happens in the wild and what happens with feral dogs and even domesticated dogs, fighting is very, very costly. And most dogs are actively trying to avoid fights. There's so much subtle communication that happens before a fight actually comes out. And most fights are scuffles, which are not as, intense or as insane as like an fight over resources in an MMA cage, So
Yeah, it's a lot of ritualized aggression, it's called, which is like it looks to us when you don't understand it, like the dog's being aggressive, but it's actually all communication to avoid intense conflict and injury. And I'm not going to try to tell you that dominance isn't a thing because I think that was like a pendulum swing in the other way that was
I
incorrect.
agree.
But we took it like way out of context and
Yes.
way to the extreme. Like dominance is a thing in dogs. Social dominance is a thing in people, right? Like I can
Yes.
be dominant in a situation over another person.
There's a social hierarchy that gets
There is.
figured out for sure.
Right? Like when I'm the boss at work, so I'm the leader, but I don't exercise my power by being violent or rude or cruel. I exercise my power by listening to my employees and taking their feedback and, providing guidance and instruction in a gentle way. And you can do the same with your dog. I had a point, but I forgot it. It'll come back at some point.
We can revisit it. So we've talked about, alpha stuff and societal expectations. Let's talk a little bit about the reality of this and how we achieve reality in dog training. Like obviously we've talked about, genetics being a factor, and, trying to go against societal expectations. So in your experience with some of your clients, what are some of the realities that you really focus on in terms of like when you're talking to somebody who might be struggling with behavioral issues that don't fit into societal norms?
Well, I think like a lot of people really like think that, oh, my dog should listen because they love me. And my dog should like just understand this stuff. And why do I have to do all this training? But we kind of like touched on this a little bit already. But like dogs' natural desires and natural goals in life do not usually align with what we want them to do. All of the stuff that we're doing training wise is kind of teaching and conditioning and guiding the dog to behave in a way that's naturally counterintuitive to them. So dogs do not naturally want to walk on a loose leash. They do not naturally want to not bark at guests. They want to chase animals. They want to be dirty. They want to be messy. They want to run, right? They want to work with you. A lot of dogs want to protect their owner and protect their property, and that's like going to be very deep-seated in them. A lot of dogs aren't really going to want to listen to you because why should they? They've not been bred for that. Livestock gardening.
Yeah, well, often our goals are also different. My goal might be, a client's goal might be, hey, I want you to go play with that dog. And my dog's goal is, I want to go kill that squirrel.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, dogs are going to have different levels of what we call biddability, meaning they really want to do what you want and they want to please you, or they have not been bred to have that desire. They've been bred to work a lot more independently or be more independent. And also dogs are going to have different degrees of sociability and tolerance and body autonomy. So you might have a dog who is, extremely laid back, loves being in tune with his owner, easy to please because he wants to do what you want, will tolerate being touched all over the place without being aggressive and can go out and about and do everything, what everybody wants. And on the flip side, you could have a dog who gets aggressive if a stranger tries to pet him, or gets aggressive if another dog tries to get in his face, or gets anxious if there's vehicles driving by, or bikers. And both of those dogs are fully normal, depending on what their genetic background is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think when we're talking about, like, the reality of dog training, like, a big part of it is understanding, like, who your dog is, right? Who is your dog? Who is your individual dog as an individual? What are they reinforced by? What is important to them? What are they afraid of? What are they nervous of? What's going to maybe get them excited or stimulated? And what are they going to determine as a threat?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think the other thing too, in terms of the reality of dog training, at least one of the things that I run into a lot with clients is people think that, oh, but I did the puppy class.
I did the puppy class and I'm done.
Yeah, and that's not how it works. You have to really think about, your dog is an autonomous being and they're going to go through changes. There's puppyhood, there's adolescence, there's young adult, there's, how they work post injury if they get injured, there's elderly age, senility is a thing. These are all going to affect your dog as well. And the training never truly ends. It's really about building that consistency and being patient. And one of the other things about the reality of dog training is management often gets overlooked. There's a reason, in this world that we use long lines, leashes, exercise pens, crates, our house, our yard, sniff spots, like whatever it is, management is a key part of that too. And then the other part I also want to say, the reality of dog training is just because your dog can do it in the kitchen does not mean that they can do it at the bar down the street. Like, you have to practice it everywhere because dogs do not generalize easily.
Right. So I think I was going to say that, like, a big part of, like, training your dog is making sure that you are understanding your individual dog, what I was just talking about, and also, like, what are their needs as an individual and how can you meet those, and understanding how they communicate and perceive the world, and being able to use that communication to help them feel safe when they don't feel safe. And to help them understand that they don't need to be protective or territorial in that situation. But meeting their needs, honestly, is like most of the battle. And I love that you brought up management, because I think one thing that professional dog trainers are really good at that has not filtered down like to the general pet owner is management. Like, when I raise a puppy, 95% of what I'm doing is just preventing that puppy from learning bad habits. It's
Yes.
so much easier to just teach them good things and not let them learn the bad stuff than trying to like fix the bad habits they've developed later on.
100%. Often dogs will grow into bad behaviors, especially if it feels good for them to do. And biting on things feels good, chewing on things feels good, jumping on people feels good. So preventative measures are going to go a lot further.
Right. And understanding that all that stuff is normal and natural depending on their developmental period, right?
Yes.
And you're so right. Like, I took, it's not I took a puppy class and I'm done. It's not I took a 6 week obedience class and I'm done. Like, we really try to explain to our students, like, we're just giving you the information. Now you have to take that and put it into practice every day. And to have a really well trained dog is years and years of work. Like,
Yeah.
everybody always comes to me and they're like, well, I want my dog to recall no matter what, and I want my dog to walk on a loose leash no matter what. I'm like, okay, so you're signing up for the 3 year package, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's exactly what it is. Like, yeah, 100%. And I think that's the thing. Like, this sounds really daunting saying it this way, that the training never ends. But the reality is if you are putting that work into your dog, it's going to become not only habitual for them, but it's going to become habitual for you. And you're going to like be able to just interact in a way in the next couple of years without even thinking about it. It is not as
Right?
overwhelming or daunting as we're making it sound.
Yeah. And like, I think a point that I would like to make in conjunction with that is like, it's not as much of like, well, I have to train my dog an hour a day, but living your life in a way that you're teaching your dog always, right? Like, one of the things that I do is I have little jars of treats all around my home. So I think another thing that professionals are really good at that like has a filter down to the pet community is like using a lot of food rewards because
Yes,
it's like super fast and easy. I have little treat jars in my house. And so when
everywhere.
I have a
Same.
dog, when I have a dog who's a puppy or who's staying with me, who's learning manners, I have those so that I can always easily and quickly reward them for making good choices. Right now, I have roofers on my roof patio, and so I have a jar of treats with me. So if my dog starts to get upset, I just say it's okay. We don't have to worry about that, and they give them treats and they calm right down.
Yep.
So it's not
I
so
definitely
much.
have mine in
Yeah,
strategic places too. I have one in my office. I've got one right by the front door. I keep one in the kitchen as well.
yeah.
And I actually have one that's in my laundry room, which is connected to my back door. So in the backyard, I can quickly, without having to go all the way to the kitchen, grab some treats if I want to reward. Plus, just building up like that good marker so that I don't always have to use treats. A good marker, just a way to communicate. On that point, I also want to mention that like when we say it's everyday habits, it's not unlike raising kids. You don't train your kids,
Yeah.
you just interact with them and guide them,
Yes. Like,
and you interrupt
yeah.
behavior you don't like, and you talk about the behavior that you do like, and you intervene when necessary.
This comes up all the time, but training classes for you to learn how to teach your dog these things. But if you just come to class and practice once a week and don't put it into your life, you're not going to see results. Like, it's just
Exactly.
like getting into shape. You have to change your behavior. You have to modify the things that you do. And it's not necessarily, again, like, it
And you have
doesn't,
to maintain it.
yeah, you have to maintain it.
You
And it
if
doesn't,
you if you go to the
yeah,
gym and get your muscles and then stop going to the gym, guess what happens? Your
yeah.
muscles deteriorate, they go back.
It's not a
So
big time commitment necessarily. Like, my goal with my clients is always to build training into their life, and not so that they feel that they have to spend an hour. I certainly don't spend an hour every day training
I'm
my
not spending
dogs.
an
Oh
hour
my gosh,
training my dog
no,
once a day.
no, I'm not. My dogs get
We
trained
would
like
kill each other,
they
to
get
be
trained while
honest.
I'm with them. They get trained when the roofers are here. They get trained when we go on walks, right? Like, they just get work every day in their life. And then I train them when I teach dog training classes.
Yes,
Right?
yes, exactly.
Um, but consistency is really important. Being patient with your dog. Like, I think one thing that is really important to understand is if the dog is misbehaving, you're probably not doing it to be a jerk. They're doing it because they haven't been taught to the level that you think that they are, or maybe they're stressed and they're trying to communicate something to you.
Yeah, there's a quote that goes around often. Your dog's not trying to give you a hard time; they're having a hard time, and that goes into some other stuff. But generally speaking, if your dog's chewing on the table, it's because they don't know any better yet. So they're not. No, there's no dog out there that is doing it with malice and with the intent of getting on your nerves. Like, it's just not how that's working.
No, and it's very easy to fall into that trap. I know. I have to watch that with myself with one of my personal dogs. He's just, oh, he's a lovely boy, but he just is very he wants to meet his own needs and serve his own needs, and he's not
Oh,
very
for sure.
thoughtful,
I think that's a valid thing to talk about. Our
right?
dog trainers, we're professional dog trainers, years and years in the business, and we do not have perfect dogs.
No, no,
My
and
dogs are autonomous beings with their own decisions.
he
So
gets on my nerves because I fall into the trap of, well, like, you should know this. You're 10 years old. You should know this. But,
yeah,
he is the dog who has taught me the most patience out of all of my dogs because his behavior is very frustrating for me. And I think it's really
yeah,
important to understand that, like, we have to be kind to ourselves, especially if you're dealing with a dog that has some behavior issues, because you're going up against the Disney dog perception. And it's embarrassing.
yes.
You feel like people are judging you. Well, you know what? To heck with that. Do what your dog needs. Advocate for your dog. If your dog's safety and well being always comes first, you will build a wonderful relationship with them. And you know what? Like, one thing that I think is really important to understand is, like, yeah, it's going to be hard work raising a dog to be the dog that you want them to be. And sometimes they might not they might not be what you expected them to be. But if you really work with that dog and build that relationship with that dog, your path might be different than you expected, but it's going to lead you somewhere that's pretty cool, and you'll be a better person for it.
100% agree. You don't get the dog you want sometimes, you get the dog you need. That's always been a quote that I've held close to myself. So, um, yeah, so I think that, battle those societal expectations. Know that being the alpha is a myth, and it's not in all how you raise them. Genetics and environment plays a lot into it, and be patient with yourself. You got to be patient with your dog. You got to be patient with yourself as well. I think those are all really good foundational keys. I'm very excited to go into our next topic. I know that you and I both would really, really love to talk about like genetics and break it down and
Yeah.
talk about terriers versus bulldogs versus toy breeds versus herding breeds. Like there's so many avenues that we can go down in terms of meeting those genetic needs on top of just lifestyle choices that you make with your dog. Um, is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot. I have anything that popped back into my head at 2 a.m. I'll be sure to put it in our notes for our next show.
We'll put it in our notes for sure. Awesome. Well, this has been get your sit together with Sarah Dixon and Rebecca Hoffman. That's me, Sarah. Where are you located? If you wanted to share any information that people could get in touch with you.
Oh, I live in the middle of nowhere in British Columbia, but I do online sessions. If anybody is interested in working with me, the internet is a wonderful thing. I do have my business is called Barks and Recreation Pet Services, and probably the best way to get a hold of me is to go on my website. You can find everything there, which is www.bnrpc.ca.
Awesome. Well, I'm Rebecca. I'm located in Portland, Oregon. I also offer Skype sessions, online sessions, and private in-home sessions in and around Portland area. You can reach me at www.dognamics.com, DOGNAMICS.com, and we'll put all of this in the show note. I want to thank you guys for listening to our show today. I really appreciate it. Feel free to subscribe to our show, leave a review. That's really going to help us out. And if there is a particular topic or question, feel free to email us at get your sit together podcast at gmail.com. We'll also be launching a Facebook website and probably some other goodies in the future. Again, thank you everybody for listening, and we hope that you have a good day.